All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're doing something wild. We are going to try and reverse engineer a mythical beast using strict Earth biology to see if we can actually construct a scientifically viable dragon. You know, for the longest time, dragons have lived exclusively in the realm of fantasy and magic. But what happens if we force a dragon to play by the very real, very strict biological and physical rules of our own planet? Let's find out. Think of this explainer as our ultimate instruction manual. We're going to take this step by step, starting from building the basic skeleton chassis all the way up to engineering a terrifying biological weapon system. We'll decode the blueprint, engineer its flight, hack its genetics, craft a flamethrower, look at its ecology, and finally, we'll grade some pop culture dragons based on our brand new scientific rules. Okay, Section 1, Decoding the Blueprint. Before we literally build our own monster, we've got to understand where the original blueprints came from in the first place. Specifically, how ancient humans misinterpreting massive fossils likely sparked these legendary myths. Just imagine for a second stumbling upon the skeleton of an ancient, legged whale thousands of miles deep in the desert. I mean, it's pretty easy to see how this sparked the idea of a giant, terrifying land-roaming beast, right? If you have no idea what a whale is, and you find this massive skull and spine sticking out of the sand, your mind is instantly going to jump to a building-sized lizard. This misinterpretation of massive, very real fossils is more than likely the root of dragon myths appearing in completely disconnected cultures all over the globe. Now, what's really interesting here is that because all bony earth creatures evolved from a single four-limbed fish ancestor, the classic six-limbed dragon is, well, a biological impossibility. Nature has essentially just smeared and shifted that exact same basic bone pattern to create horses, chimps, birds, whales, the whole shebang. So a vertebrate with 4 legs and 2 extra wings completely violates our planet's evolutionary blueprint. What does that mean for us? It means our build has to use the 4-limbed wyvern model, basically converting the front 2 limbs into wings. Moving on to Section 2, Engineering Heavyweight Flight. Now that we have our 4-limbed chassis picked out, we have to solve a massive engineering challenge. How on earth do we get this heavyweight reptile off the ground? We basically have 3 evolutionary options for our front limbs. Bats fly by while endlessly high-fiving the air with all their elongated fingers. Pterosaurs used one massive, super long finger. But it turns out for our dragon, we're definitely going to want to use the avian dinosaur model. Specifically, we're looking at creatures like the hoatzin. That's a real modern bird that actually retained claws on its wings. By using this avian model with claws mixed in, we give our dragon some much-needed dexterity so it can still climb and grapple, even though its arms are now technically wings. So here's the absolutely crucial point. Without a huge keel bone to anchor its massive chest muscles, our dragon literally cannot flap its wings. This instantly disqualifies any smooth-chested lizard you see in the movies. To power the immense downward force required to lift a heavy dragon into the air, those pectoral muscles need to be enormous, and they absolutely need that tall, protruding ridge on the sternum to physically hold onto. No keel, no flight. And that brings us to the respiratory system. This brilliantly illustrates the mandatory 2-stage bird lung system we must install. Unlike human lungs, where stale air just kind of mixes with fresh air, bird lungs use a continuous flow. It takes multiple breaths for air to make a full circuit, moving from posterior air sacs over the lungs to the anterior sacs and finally out. This highly efficient system continuously extracts oxygen and, amazingly, it uses connected air sacs inside hollow bones to cool the massive dragon from the inside out. When you're outputting that much energy for flight, internal air cooling is an absolute lifesaver. All right, Section 3, Hacking the Genetic Code. With the hardware installed, we've got to look at the software. And by that I mean we need to rewrite DNA like it's Python code to successfully scale our lizard up to a massive, building-sized predator. To shape our dragon, we need to manipulate Hox genes. Think of these like a clock in a growing embryo, turning on and off to dictate exactly where the head, ribs, and tail go. By tweaking the timeline of these Hox genes, which is exactly what nature does in snakes, by the way, we can force the middle segment to stay active longer. The embryo's clock basically runs slower, telling the body to just keep making ribs and spine vertebrae. This simple genetic hack gives us that long, terrifying dragon body shape without needing to invent entirely new genes from scratch. The big takeaway here is that growing a giant creature requires dozens of system-wide upgrades just to prevent it from collapsing in on itself. We can't just crank up the growth hormones and call it a day. More cells mean a statistically higher chance of tumors, right? So we must drastically increase their cancer resistance. A larger body also produces way more waste, requiring massively enlarged kidneys and livers. And to fuel this giant beast, we'd actually need to borrow specialized bile functions from modern bears so the dragon's pancreas can properly digest the massive quantities of high-fat meat it's definitely going to be eating. Which brings us to Section 4, crafting biological flamethrowers. Okay, let's dive into the absolute most exciting system of our build. We are going to take standard Earth chemistry and engineer a fully functional biological flamethrower. First off, we absolutely must ditch the classic idea of a gas-filled stomach. Gas lacks physical mass, meaning it has terrible range. It basically just creates a fireball right in front of the mouth. Plus, a giant belly full of hydrogen makes our dragon a giant floating balloon fire hazard. No thanks. Instead, our dragon is going to produce a thick, gelled liquid fuel. By modifying the naturally occurring sebaceous glands in the skin, the dragon can pump out a mixture of octanol for fuel and stearic acid as a thickener. This creates a biological napalm that acts exactly like a military M2 flamethrower. It gives the dragon the ability to shoot sticky fire over incredibly long distances. But, fuel is useless without an ignition source. To ignite our gel, we'll borrow a hypergolic ignition mechanism from a real insect, the bombardier beetle. This little guy mixes hydrogen peroxide and a manganese dioxide catalyst to blast a boiling caustic liquid out of its rear end at predators. It's crazy. If we scale up this chemical reaction bladder and place it near the dragon's throat, we have an instant boiling hot propellant to spray our gelled fuel. Now, octanol won't just burst into flames at boiling temperatures. We still need a spark. So by combining the beetle's biological catalyst spray with an oily, hyperreactive chemical called isoprene, which is actually produced by the very real Dictaminus albus plant, sometimes literally called the gas plant, we create a foolproof spark. The plant produces dictaminine, which degrades into a massive cloud of isoprene gas at warm temperatures. Mix that with our boiling hydrogen peroxide, and it actually auto-ignites. That creates a self-igniting spark right in the dragon's mouth to light the main fuel jet. Boom. Alternatively, if we don't want to use plant chemistry, we could go with a physical spark mechanism. We could give the dragon a muscular gizzard to swallow flintstones, but relying on finding the right rocks is kind of risky. Instead, we can engineer the dragon to use a protein called ferritin to hyperaccumulate iron in its teeth. Much like how a beaver uses iron to grow those self-sharpening bright orange teeth, our dragon could grow iron sulfide lace teeth. When the dragon violently smashes its jaws together, these hard iron teeth would scrape and shatter, creating actual physical sparks to ignite the fuel. How cool is that? Moving into Section 5, Ecology and Alternative Defenses. Let's look at how this apex predator fits into its environment and how we can easily swap out these biological parts to create entirely different elemental variants of dragons. The most fascinating thing to note here is just how modular biology really is. Simply by swapping the fire bladder for different naturally occurring Earth traits, we get whole new species. We can trade the fuel gel for a thick, conductive hagfish slime and pair it with a massive electric eel organ. Boom! That gives us a functional lightning dragon that shoots electrified slime. An ice dragon couldn't realistically shoot freezing gas, but an Arctic sea-dwelling variant could absolutely suck up and violently expel pre-chilled Arctic ocean water to knock down prey. And a poison variant? Easy. Just makes highly concentrated caustic stomach acid with the unbelievably lethal venom of a marine cone snail. We also need to make sure its armor functions correctly. Often in fiction, dragon scales are depicted like fish scales, individual plates that can be plucked off. But for a biologically accurate reptile, its scales are actually just a continuous layer of thickened, folded keratin skin. To make it dragon tough, we genetically reinforce that keratin with incredibly strong spider silk proteins. This keeps the armor flexible, and crucially, it allows the dragon to heal and shed its skin all at once, just like a snake. Finally, Section 6, Pop Culture's Best Dragon. With our biologically accurate rules firmly established, it is time to field test our data. Let's grade Hollywood's most famous cinematic dragons to see who actually passes the Earth science test. Let's look at Smaug from the Hobbit movies. The original theatrical release had 6 limbs, making it an utter biological impossibility on Earth. Now, the filmmakers did update it to 4 limbs for the second film, which is great, a step in the right direction. But the model completely lacked a protruding keel bone, meaning Smaug physically couldn't flap his wings. However, Harry Potter's Hungarian horntail is the ultimate winner here. It perfectly aligns with our rules. It has 4 limbs, it has a massive keel bone to anchor its chest muscles, and crucially, it has the highest biological wing-to-weight ratio of the entire bunch. But there is one harsh biological reality we have to confront. 250 kilograms. That is the estimated weight of the Quetzalcoatlus, which is the absolute maximum size a flying animal has ever reached in Earth's history. So, while our Hungarian horntail is structurally sound, any cinematic dragon that weighs several tons would need ludicrous commercial airliner speeds just to generate enough lift to avoid crashing into the ground. At the end of the day, physics eventually puts a hard limit on flesh and bone. Now that we've proven we can engineer a living, breathing dragon purely by manipulating the rules of nature, hacking Hawk's genes, building biological M2 flamethrowers, and perfectly balancing wing-to-weight ratios, it really changes how you look at the natural world. Biology isn't magic, but it is incredibly modular. It really makes you wonder, exactly what other terrifying monsters could we pull out of fiction and build next using nothing but the animals already roaming the Earth? Thanks for diving into the science with me today.